significance of it until later. True.
After reading your book, I opened myself up to accepting that it's not about time management, it's about mind management. But then, have you read the book Some Days Today by Matthew Dix?
I don't. I haven't. I've never heard of that book, actually.
Oh, it's a nice book. He's a storyteller, and he's an author and a blogger, and he's a storyteller by profession as well. In the book, he talks about looking at all the cracks of time. Like, you're waiting in a meeting for 10 minutes, take out a pen and paper or write something on your phone. You're waiting for someone at the coffee shop and that person is late, take out your book and or take out your iPad and start writing. Write a few sentences down. Do you think you can work like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I've developed a concept that I call CRUMB TIME, that I've written about on my blog and talked about on my podcast before, which is just that. I think it's those little pockets of time in between things where you're waiting for something to happen and you're not sure when it's going to happen, or you do know that it's going to happen, but you don't feel like you can do anything significant because it's such a small amount of time. And I think what most of us do with that time right now is we open up our phones and we check social media, we check our email, we might go in sort of a Bermuda Triangle of email, social media, and one, social media two, and we don't really get anywhere with it. And it's easy to reason ourselves into it because, well, clearly you don't have very much time. You can't really get that deep into something. But I found that if you really set up the right systems in life, you can really make good use of that time. One way to do that is to just have a task management system that has a context tag for that. For me, it might be a mental state, which, for me, that's like an administrative mental state, like things that might take a little bit, or I might even call it CRUMB time and say, oh, well, this is something that I can do when I have very little time. And maybe it's not something urgent that needs to be done right now, but let's mark it CRUMB time and have it ready to go when I next encounter CRUMB time. One of the other really great ways to use CRUMB time, or ways to have a system set up, is by having what I call a Zettelkasten, or no, it's not what I call a Zettelkasten. I've written a book about the Zettelkasten, which is a note-taking method. I wrote a book called Digital Zettelkasten. And one of the things that I like to do with that time is I'll just pull out one of my notes apps, and I might have all of the highlights that I've taken in a book all exported to a note, and then I can go through that list of highlights and kind of highlight parts of the highlights that are interesting. And that's, I find, to also be a really useful way to use that liminal time. That's what Nirial calls it, the liminal time, CRUMB time. And I think it's really just a matter of being prepared for that moment. You can't necessarily plan how to use CRUMB time really great. When you have CRUMB time, you're not necessarily going to come up with the best thing. But if you have things in place that you can kind of nudge forward during those moments, then it makes it so much easier to finally do so.
That makes sense, because I was going to ask you that if you have 10 minutes before because somebody is late, how do you find the flow state that could actually help be the next content for your book or your blog post, which is what Matthew Dix tries to do, because he's always in that mode. But in my mind, I think your way has a better way of using that CRUMB time, because you won't be able to enter the flow state for that 10-minute window. It's better to use that time for administrative tasks that are just part of your to-do list, and just get rid of it and in those blocks of times.
That's not to say that you can't be creative, though. I mean, I've talked about flow state, I guess, in this conversation already, but I feel like flow state maybe is a little bit overrated. Or maybe overrated isn't the word I'm looking for. Maybe it's more like it shouldn't necessarily be so much the goal that it's something that you are obsessed with and are always trying to pursue, because you can do creative things without being in a flow state. So for example, one thing I might do is, if I think of an idea for a good post for X, or they used to call them tweets, I have a list on my phone, or a note on my phone, where I'll just sort of put the idea and I'll put it in brackets. So it's not ready to go. I haven't just gone ahead and posted it. And sometimes I do that. But if it's an idea I really want to work on, then I'll have it in there. And so maybe if I have 10 minutes, I'll open that up and I'll say, okay, well, what's some different ways I can express this idea? And I might start brainstorming right there on my phone, or if I have something to write on, I might scribble and write there. And I might make some progress on that, and I might not. And that doesn't necessarily sound like it's going to be much, but the things that I post on X, I later, on a monthly basis, go through those things, put them into a database, sort of rank and rate those and sort through those, and expand those ideas into newsletters for my weekly newsletter, Love Mondays. And those then become 100 to 200 word essays, roughly, 2-minute essays is kind of what my newsletter mostly consists of. And if those go well, then it might become like a longer article. When my podcast was active, it might become a podcast episode. It might become a short read book, or it might become an entire book. So this is how I take these little crumbs and kind of build them up into something.